All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Victory Condition Gaming. My name is Doug. Today on the show, I'm so excited. I have a very talented designer, author, comic book artist, I think, as well. And she's just got this huge resume that encompasses so many different fields. And I came across this awesome game called Threadbare, the Stitch Punk RPG. If at all if you're interested in any of the things that we're talking about tonight, especially Threadbare, check out the links down below in the description of this video. But first of all, let's welcome Stephanie Bryant to the show. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on and doing this little chat with me tonight.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
My pleasure. I'm so excited. I found your game online and I'm like, oh my god! And I ordered it and I got it in. I'm like, oh, this is so good. I want to make sure more people know about this game because it is just it kind of hits our demographic as far as our show is concerned. But before we dive into Threadbare, let's talk a little bit about you. Let's I'll have you introduce yourself and tell folks who you are and what you do, and kind of you can do a little shameless self promotion if you want, and tell folks what you because you've been involved in quite a few different projects, and I want to hear all about them. And I've done my research a little bit, but I want to hear it from you as well, and I'm sure everybody would like to hear it as well.
Sure. So I am a writer, as you said, game designer, a knitter, a bass player.
Nice.
I do a lot of things. And in the past, I wrote and published a comic book for knitters. I did not draw it. I hired somebody to do the artwork because visual art is something that I realized it would take me about 2 years to develop the skills that I wanted to have in order to do that. I can draw, I just can't draw cartoons.
Okay.
Because cartoons are hard. Comics are hard. Anyone who tells you otherwise is overlooking the real art in comics. So there's definite art to it and craft. So anyway, and I've written a number of computer books back in the day. I used to be a technical writer. And now by day, I am a Scrum Master and project manager for software companies. So
wow, okay,
yeah,
very cool, very cool. And then you've worked on a couple other RPGs before you put out Threadbare. You've worked on Time Watch. I know that.
Mm-hmm. So I've contributed to a book of basically fiction for Time Watch called The Book of Changing Years. It's essentially a bunch of mission reports from different time travel missions to set the timeline correct or undo something, or even to change it to be incorrect. So that was a lot of fun. I loved working on that project. I loved working with Kevin Culp. He's a fantastic person and a joy to work with. I've also contributed to a few other projects. I contributed an adventure for the Dracula dossier called Day of the Werewolf. So it's a Night's Black Agents adventure that sort of parallels the Carlos the Jackal character from actual history, who was a terrorist in the 70s and everything. And this book, or this adventure sort of parallels that, but if Carlos were also a werewolf. So there's kind of a little bit more going on to it.
Nice.
And so I've done a number of things. It contributed to the Baby Beast theory. They're just like I like the small, self-contained pieces like
Sure.
that because I can focus on them, knock them out in 6 years. Invent, an entire math system. Which brings me to Threadbare, of course, which took 6 years from the time I started working on it, almost 7 years, I guess,
Wow.
until just recently when it was finally completely fulfilled. And I would like to point out, Doug, you were one of the very last pre-orders
I
that
was.
got in. You were.
Wow.
You were. That's
Wow.
why yours came so quickly. Other people who are probably listening are like, I pre-ordered it months ago and it didn't. Doug sneaked in right under the wire. So
I forgot how I came across it, but I don't know now I'm trying to think of how I found you, and I saw that it was still, you could still go in the pledge manager, and so I kind of got in my order as quick as I could. I know what I was how I found it. Sydney and I were doing content for, we haven't even put it out yet, for Stuffed Fables, the game by Plaid Hat, and we were learning that, and I said there's gotta be an RPG that's pretty similar to this. There's gotta be. And I kind of Googled around it, and that's how I came across your game. And I'm gonna tell folks right away that if you have Stuffed Fables, which is a really hot game right now, and it's a lot of fun, and you can watch our content once it's finally up. But you should get a copy of Stephanie's book, because you'll be able to use the minis for that game in with this no problem, and you can kind of get dual purpose the minis, which is great, and I love it. So that's how I found your RPG, and once I started reading it, once I got it in and started reading it, or actually when I get the PDF first, and I started reading it, and I was like, oh wow, I have to get Stephanie on the show and have her talk all about this. Now let's talk.
I'm glad you found us.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about it's a PBTA. It's powered by the Apocalypse.
Yes.
How long have you been playing Powered by it's a really hot system right now. Everybody's playing PBTA games. How long have you been playing PBTA? What's your background in that system?
I can honestly say I've been playing Powered by the Apocalypse games, I think, less time than I've been working on Threadbare. Because
really? Okay.
Yes, Threadbare started out as a dice pool game.
Okay.
And shortly after I started working on it, I was in my first Dungeon World game, which was at a convention. So I think I started working on Threadbare in, I want to say, summer or fall of 2012, somewhere around there. Okay. And I go to this convention in LA every year called Strategicon. They hold it 3 times a year, once in February, once in May, and then once over Labor Day. And I'm pretty sure it was in February that I played in Dungeon World, and it was phenomenal. And I had never experienced a game like that before. And Dungeon World at that point was kind of hitting this high point in its popularity, where we had heard all about it, but we had, like, my friends and I had never played it. And I played with my friend Mike at what was like kind of a demo game almost, somebody was just like, oh yeah, I'll run Dungeon World, but it'll be short, and fun and everything else. And only Mike and I showed up to play the game. So I played a barbarian, he played a thief, and we had a blast. I mean, I dropped a house on something. Like, it was amazingly fun. It was exactly what Dungeon World should be. It was so phenomenal. And I went home, and I had this game that I'd been working on, this Threadbare game, where the math was all wrong, and I kept fighting with it and everything. Sure. I had a death spiral in Threadbare when it first started. But I was still playtesting it. I'd actually playtested it at that convention, and I was still playtesting it and trying it out with people. And a few people would say, hey, it's really not fun the way combat works in your game. And people who have Threadbare now and are hearing this are going to say, "What combat?" Because I took combat completely out eventually.
Yeah, it's not even a thing anymore. It's a montage.
It's a montage. But at the time, it was a really big part of the game. And the way combat worked was when you got hurt, it was harder to both keep fighting, and it was harder to run away. So you literally just had this war of attrition while toys were fighting with each other, and they kept falling apart more and more, but they couldn't quite end the job. So it was terrible. So I and possibly if I discovered other systems, a different system at that time, then Fate might have, or Threadbare might have been some other system.
Sure.
I slipped there and said Fate. It probably would never have been Fate because I had played Fate before, and I know that it would have been different.
Sure.
But anyway, so it ended up being just a beautiful fit for a dungeon world hack, and so I started hacking it. I had not played Apocalypse World. I didn't play Apocalypse World until like 2 years ago.
Okay.
Long after I started on Threadbare seriously. Long after I playtested Threadbare at Metatopia, which was one of the best experiences I've ever had. Metatopia is a convention held in New Jersey in November every year. It's hosted by Double Exposure. It's a phenomenal experience for game designers. It's a phenomenal experience for gamers who are just there to play, but all the games that are there are playtests. There are no publicly available games. So, and it's board games, card games, RPGs. So you go there and it is like boot camp for game designers.
Sure, that sounds awesome.
It's amazing. I mean, just amazing. And my experience at Metatopia was I had two play tests of my game. In one of them, I had a few people who were also game designers, and I had a few people who were not. And the people who were not game designers thought my game was different from what I was trying to make. So I wanted it to be this more story-ish game that was less about fighting.
Okay. Yep.
And my problem was what I had designed was still, despite having taken out that death spiral and a lot of other things, the game I had designed was still very much about combat over here. And so I was aiming over here and everything was driving over here. And I was like, I don't understand why people can't see that. I told them this is where I want them to, but the game design was not driving them that way. The game design was driving them over here. Sure. Which happens. That happens a lot in game design, and it takes a lot of playtesting to find that. And to see when that happens. So so Metatopia was great, and so that playtest, reinforced and brought it back and brought it home to me. Like there was something fundamentally missed in this game. If I wanted people to go over here, there was a big detour sign here that was driving them away, and I needed to find. I couldn't find out where that detour sign was. And then I had what's called the high test, and that's where everybody in the test is a very experienced playtester, or also a game designer.
Okay.
So I had like Mark Richardson, and I had Rob Donahue, I had Kate Elliott. I had this just great group of people who knew how to do a playtest, who had been the game designer in a playtest, but who are very thoughtful game designers and very experienced game designers. And they gave me the best advice. They said, Stephanie, I get where you're going. I see the destination you're pointing us to. And the detour sign is here. The detour sign is in your playbook. The first stat, you keep saying this game is about making friends. Your first move that you've listed in your playbook is how to get into a fight.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. And so I started to just redesign everything from the ground up. And that's when, at some point in the next 6 months to a year, is when I realized, hey, I don't need to have a combat skill at all. Right. I don't need to have a fight. I don't need to make that even an option. And I wanted to still have something that represented physical abilities, but I didn't want it to be tied to combat. Because if you think about it, we use our bodies, our physical bodies, quite a bit for things that have nothing to do. I don't get into a fight most of the time.
Yeah,
most every day. In fact, if I get into a fight, it's usually not with my body.
Right.
It's usually with my keyboard, really.
Yep. So, almost daily.
Yeah. Well, instead, I looked at how, the things that I wanted people to do. And so every move that's in this game, like all the basic moves, drive you towards breaking things.
Right.
Really, they don't even drive you towards breaking things. It just that's a natural consequence of playing the game. Repairing things, building things, and those are like the main thrusts of the action in this game. And so all of the basic moves are geared towards repair, build, make friends. And making friends is basically just a step to building something, because you need friends in order to complete making a device. So, and beyond that, like I was like, okay, so what do I do with the guy who just really wants to get into a fight? It happens all the time. If you take out combat entirely, I've played Golden Sky Stories. I take out combat entirely in that game, and when I've played Golden Sky Stories, when people get frustrated, which does happen sometimes, they turn to the one thing that the game does not support, which is fighting. And so I said, well, what do I do when that happens? Like a good GM, a really good GM, just doesn't have that happen. Players never get frustrated. But I'm a really good GM, and players still get frustrated in my games. So
it just happens. That's the way it happens.
Somebody's going to throw a punch eventually, or you're going to play with a group that, they're 10-year-old kids and all they want to do is fight, like that's just, maybe that's just where they are in their lives. So I said, okay. And then I looked very carefully at what happens in a fight in an RPG. And the thing that I noticed in an RPG is that either you TPK and nobody had fun, or you win. Right. That's that's pretty much it. Very rarely in any RPG do you run away. And in some interpretations, running away is winning. So that's where the montage came from. I said, okay, great. Then we're going to take away the uncertainty. And if you montage, if you get into a fight, you montage. You get broken. So because the chances of you getting out of a fight without getting broken are pretty much zero.
Right.
You get broken. And you win, and you get to decide what those two things mean. What part got broken, and what does winning mean to you? Winning can mean to the player, because the question isn't what does it mean to your character. It's what does it mean to you. Winning to the player could mean I lose. A player could think, okay, I get beaten to a pulp by this guy, because I think that where the story is going to go from there is good and worthwhile and something I want. But if they're like, no, I don't want that, that's also fine. They're the ones with the narrative control on that. And and it's great. It works phenomenally well most of the time when characters get into fights in Threadbare. It's usually one, maybe two players who are actually, throwing punches, and everybody else is running away.
Nice.
Everybody else is like, I just winning for me right now is not getting in the fight.
Not being in this. Yep.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, great. You hurt yourself getting away, but you don't get involved, you know?
Right.
And so that was great. But then I still had this physical stat. And I was like, what do I do with like this? Nobody's ever going to put any points in strong arm if they never have to use it. And that's when I started thinking about what else can you use your strength for. So that's where we came up with, push and pull. So if you want to move something bigger than you, which Threadbare, it's all toys. Everything is bigger than you.
Sure.
You've inherited a world built for beings that are, 10 times your size. So what do you do? Yeah. So you have push and pull, and but it still wasn't enough. It's just one basic move that let you use that. And I'm going to tell you this great little story, which is I was running a game for my sister, who I'm going to see next week, and I'm going to run Threadbare for her and my niece and my niece's friends. So I was running a game for my sister and my niece. They're such great role players. For my sister, my niece, and my niece's friends from school. And they're all very clever girls, and they were all, they had brought their characters, they had some great ideas, and we were the party was in a vehicle hurtling towards basically a canyon. Like they were gonna there was a ravine, and they were gonna go in the ravine if they didn't do something. And my niece is, she's science-minded young lady, and she's like, okay, we need to start building a ramp. And I'm like, great, this is build a device. I've got a move for this. We can do this. All right, you're running out of time, but you can do it. And she's like, okay, well, do we have the people and the things? I'm like, I don't know. Let's find out. And my sister, in a stroke of brilliance, looks at me. She's like, we don't have time for that. If we hold our breaths, we'll fly over. We'll float.
Okay.
And
yep.
I was like, okay, physics doesn't work that way, but I see no reason why that's not feasible in Threadbare. So
sure.
So I made her roll the dice for it, and she rolled like 2 6s, so boxcars. So I was like, all right, it works. Sure, you sail over and you guys make it, and the adventure continued, and it was a lot of fun. And I went home and I thought, that was really cool. She got to break physics. That
is really cool.
Really cool. And at the time, I had made it like an intelligence roll, but I was that stat was on its way out because I didn't really have anything that used it.
Okay.
So so I made the figure stuff out roll, which is that was what the smarts was for. I made that strong arm. And so strong arm represents your physical ability to move things, but it also represents sort of your force upon the universe.
Okay. Nice. I like that.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, it's not just your ability to physically manipulate things, but it's literally like your gravitas in pushing around literal physics. And maybe it's a little bit like magic, maybe not. Maybe in this, new post-apocalyptic world, we can hold our breaths and float because there's just more helium in the air. Who knows?
Sure. You never know.
So you never know.
It's toys that are alive. I mean, come on.
Exactly. It's toys that are alive that are running around and doing strange things. So
let's talk a little bit about the 3 types of characters that a player can play as. I like all of them. I think it's the third and final character. Its type is hilarious, and I had to, as soon as I saw it in the book, I immediately showed my wife, and I'm like, man, you gotta see this. Like, you can play as a sock in this game. Like, how genius is that? Like, that's just hilarious because I shouldn't share this, but like one of the first things that we did when we were dating, like we made sock puppets for some reason, just out of the blue. We I don't know where the heck we came up with this idea, but we made sock like ridiculous sock puppets, and I'm like, look at this, you can play a sock puppet, and so I had to show her that, and that was just awesome. But why don't you? I've already spoiled the one that I thought was
fine.
great, but
so obviously you can play a stuffed animal,
right.
which is called a softie. You can play a hard plastic animal or a toy, which is called a mecha. So hard plastic or metal or wooden. Like if you got a metal train, that could be that can be mecha as well. And then you have the third type is the sock, and so the reasons for that have to do with the DNA of Threadbare. And one of my friends actually posted when you posted the event saying that he can't be watching tonight, but he'd like me to talk about the influences on Threadbare.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
So Threadbare's DNA comes from from the 8th issue of my comic book for knitters, Hand-Knit Heroes. Okay. It was never produced. I wrote 8 scripts. We made 4 of them. There are 4 that have never seen the light of day. And so in the 8th one, the Hand-Knit Heroes go into this alternate world where they've been turned into stuffed toys, crocheted stuffed dolls. Okay. And the mecha versus softie thing was a conflict. And somewhere in thinking up this world and this setting, and remember, Threadbare was a much more contentious world before I took combat out. So
right.
I decided there was a class of beings called that were socks, and they were oppressed by the softies because they were looked upon as these lesser beings because they were like an unstuffed softie.
Okay.
And you have to understand that as a knitter, I have made so many socks in my life. I knit socks a lot. Okay. They're a great project. I love doing them. And so, a sock was just a natural fit for sort of the what else can you be? The unincluded 4th type of character was hybrid. You could be something that had taken enough parts from both softies and mechas that it was a hybrid. That got dropped when the whole softie mecha conflict just pretty much was eliminated anyway. But yeah, so softies or socks were originally they weren't even a playable type. They were just an NPC. And I was like, because they're the oppressed, they're weaker, they're less formidable. And one of my friends, James, when we were playtesting, he said, I want to try this sock thing. I was like, okay, you understand I only statted out socks so I could use them as an NPC, right? He's like, yeah, I understand. All right. So he tried it out, and individually a sock was worthless. But if a sock had a pair, if it had a second sock, they could summon more socks to help them. And when they helped each other, they had they were cumulative, because usually when a character helped another character, they added half their dice. But if socks helped each other, they added their full dice. And he was like, okay, so now I have 16 socks with me. I'm like, okay, this is a gang. I don't I don't know what to do with this. And so that's why that's why there's socks and Threadbare. And it's terrific. And around the same time, I also discovered a game that you will really appreciate, Doug. You're going to have to check this out. It's called Argyle and Crew. Okay. And it is the sock puppet role-playing game.
Oh my god!
The first session, you make your character by taking a sock and turning it into a sock puppet. It's a game for families. You know, it's a family-oriented role-playing game. And the guy who made it, he was a regular poster on Reddit. So was I at the time. And he kept he kept promoting it and everything. And I was like, I gotta check this out. So I checked it out. I was like, oh my gosh, someone else is making a sock game. This is great. So whenever people are excited about the fact you can roleplay a sock, which, by the way, a lot of people are really into that.
I
It's
just thought it
terrific,
was. I
right?
thought I opened the book thinking it was just going to be toys, and then when I see a sock, I'm like,
There's a
oh my
sock.
god! And then you think like, wow, I'm like sock, but yeah, it works. Like it's
It just
great. It's
it
it's
just does.
genius.
You're kind of like, that seems weird, and yet
It works.
it
Yeah,
fits.
yeah,
Kind of that
absolutely.
lost toys, lost
Yep.
items, lost sock thing. I don't know.
Exactly. Well,
So
you think. Well, I mean, I lose socks all the time in in the laundry, and like, where do they go? They must go into some vortex of, and it's probably that's where they turn
yep,
up in the toy apocalypse.
they must.
Oh no, this is a great. This is such a great game for all ages, and I love how you have set it up so that you can kind of you can gauge uh well, not the violence, but the you can
The
kind of get
content.
the content for ages. So
Hmm.
if you want to play on something like Toy Story or something a little mellower for younger kids, you can
Yeah.
make the game play that way.
Yeah, you
Uh,
can scale it so that it's basically My Little Pony with socks
right,
and stuffed animals.
My Little Pony with
Or
socks. I like
yeah,
that.
or
Awesome.
you can make it and the three tones are fluffy, scruffy, and
Yes.
dented. Fluffy is it's much lighter. It's everything's a little bit brighter, everything's a little bit sweeter. And nobody that you confront will be uh, unreasonably hostile, right?
Right.
Like anyone you have conflict with, it's going to be a misunderstanding.
Right.
And then there's Scruffy, where nothing you confront can be unreasonably hostile, and like when I say unreasonable, I mean can't be reasoned with.
Right.
So nothing can be outright murderous without having some parlay available. Um, and they're it can be a little bit rougher, a little bit more adult humor if you wanted to.
Yep. Yep.
It can just be just a little bit grittier. Um, I consider that one the sweet spot. Scruffy is really where Threadbare shines, and then there's Dented, where players can act against each other. There can be outright murderous foes. It can be downright noir in its
Sure.
outlook, and there is actually a novel called Amberville that captures this really well. It's a noir novel about like stuffed animals, and
Okay.
it is definitely one of the inspirations for Threadbare, because the characters, I mean, there's like a mob boss and his daughter who's a bunny, and she's cheating on her husband. I mean, it just like
Wow. Okay.
bizarre, like like you know weird intertoy drama,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
That it wasn't right. It was like it's not like the right tone for Threadbare, but if you really wanted to ratchet up into that
You
level,
could.
you
Sure.
could. This game would help with that. It's still not it's still not really a combat game, but you can certainly have a lot of gritty meat to it. And then once you get past Dented, once you're like, I want to play the apocalypse part of it. At that point, I suggest to people that they just play Apocalypse World
Yeah. Yeah. Probably. Yeah.
and
That's.
say that they're all toys, which you totally could. You
Oh
could
yeah. I
take
guess you could. Yeah.
there's nothing stopping you from taking Apocalypse World and saying, oh, the brainer is a speak and spell, or
Yeah.
so they could they can all be sort of like the Battle Babe could be literally could be Barbie doll, you know.
Sure.
So
Huh. Yeah. I didn't even thought of that. That's interesting. All right. Well, we've just a few minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about what other projects you have in the works. I know that you are on the Gears of Defiance Kickstarter that's on right now, which
Am.
I should have Ryan on hopefully here fairly soon, probably in the next couple weeks, to talk about that. But you are a stretch goal on that. You want
I
to talk
am a
about
stretch goal in that.
you want to talk about that
That
for a little
launched
bit?
today. So I'm going to be writing I guess it's a setting basically for Gears of Defiance. Gears of Defiance is an interesting game. It's a, it's basically a game about resistance against a much more powerful and an entitled social force. So, um, in my setting, I kind of riffed off of Altered Carbon,
Yeah. Yes.
and
Yes.
so there's sort of this. It's not cyberpunk in any way. The setting is actually more steampunk,
Right.
but I
Right.
kind of riffed off of that idea of like, oh, we have a class of immortals, and then the player characters are from this underclass of the people who handle the dead. So, like, in theory, they never even get to touch the immortals, right? So
Okay.
there's kind of a neat thing going on there.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
so yeah, yeah. And I'm also writing I wrote an adventure for Trilemma
Okay.
Adventures, which that's Michael Prescott's Patreon. He basically puts out like a 2-page adventure every month, I think it is.
Nice.
And and he was like, "Hey, all of my adventures ultimately are me writing, so it would be great to have someone who isn't me write them once in a while." And he reached out to me and he said, "Would you be interested in doing this?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Let me think about it." And I thought about it, and at 4 o'clock in the morning one night, I came up with this really cool idea of an insomnia-based adventure, and then I kept working on it and I kept thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you watch The Simpsons, but there's a very early Simpsons episode where Bart Simpson is trying to go to sleep at night and he keeps muttering, "Can't sleep, the clown will eat me. Can't sleep, the clown will eat me."
Okay.
Uh, so now I had a setting because now it's a carnival, uh,
Ah.
and nobody can sleep because
Oh
the clowns might
man.
eat them, and so it's like this little nightmarish, weird, bizarre um, uh, kind of. It's not even like a dungeon in the classic sense of like going underground or anything, but it's weird and horrifying, and everything is just a little bit off kilter in every possible way.
Nice.
So
Nice.
yeah,
Very cool. Very cool. Are you going to be at any conventions this year? You've mentioned a few already, but do you want to let
uh,
folks know where you might
yeah,
be in person?
I will be at Strategicon again in May, and I am planning right now to be at Gen Con.
Nice.
I will be staffing the IGDN, that's the Indie Game Designer Network booth at Gen Con.
Very
That is
nice.
the plan right now. I make no guarantees. I just started a brand new job yesterday, so we'll
Yes.
see how things shake out.
That's always questionable when it
Yeah,
comes to work. I know that's the way it is for me. It's hard to get time off from work to
yeah,
do the things that we love to do.
that we love to do.
Yeah.
I also so convention season in Las Vegas is different from
Okay.
convention season elsewhere. We tend to do things not in the summer because it's too hot.
Sure. Sure. That makes
So
sense.
we last weekend we had our local convention, our local board gaming convention called MeepleCon.
Oh.
We'll have another one in the fall, probably in October or November, and I'll probably go to that one. I might make it to Big Bad Con as well. But then also up in Utah, there's a convention in the middle of winter. It's in January at Bryce
Okay.
Con, at Bryce Canyon, and it's
Ah.
great. It's completely isolated. There's snow on the ground. There's an ice, there's ice skating. Like that's
That's
what we have
awesome.
available, because it's, it's the Bryce National Park. Beautiful, beautiful place to visit, and I go to that one in January every year and have a really good time. Very nice little convention, like, just a few hundred people, but
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, those are good. I don't like the big. I mean, big conventions are okay. It's just sometimes like by like the second day, halfway through, I'm just like, okay, this is too many people. Like I just gotta have my own space. Like put me
yeah,
somewhere where I can
yeah,
just.
and I love people, and I love the big conventions. But you have to be able to withdraw.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
absolutely,
you have
absolutely.
to have a space to kind of back up and be like, okay, I need to rest, and then I can go out and do more.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So. All right, our time is just about up. I'm going to say if you are interested in Threadbare, go buy it on Drive-Thru RPG right now,
or
or can
IPR
or where's that?
or IPR. It's available on drive-through and and IPR.
Oh, excellent,
IPR,
excellent.
Indie Press
Yep.
Revolution.
They yeah, they've got a whole bunch of. I go to that site almost once a week, and I'm like, oh, I need to put that on my list, and I need to put that.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely pick up multiple forms. You can get it in hardback, you can get it in softcover, you can get it in PDF, and you can be like me and just get one of every single format.
There are two types of softcover, in fact.
Oh, is there?
So, yep, there's so we have the hardcover, and it's beautifully done in full color, as everybody can see. Absolutely gorgeous. There's the soft cover color that is also beautifully done interior, full color art, and a soft cover so that, if you're a little budget conscious. And then there's the very budget minded black and white interior for people who just they don't care that much about the artwork,
Yep.
or gaming group that really needs to. There you are. I was going to say, if you're in a gaming group that just really needs to conserve their dollars, or you're like, hey, we want to have 4 copies, but we don't need all 4 of them to be color. Great, you can pick up black and white, and then we also have the PDF, of course.
Yeah. No, it's great. I as soon as I saw it, I thought it was such a great game, and then once I got it in my hands and got to read it, it was just everything that I hoped it would be, and I hope this gets word out a little bit more about it, because I think
hope so.
more families and parents need to take a look at it, because I get asked all the time, what I want to start my kid playing an RPG. What game should I introduce them to? This is going to be one of the the first couple that I list off, because I think it's
Thank you.
I think every kid can relate to having their toys come alive. I know I always thought about it whenever I left my room, I always think, what are my toys doing? My toys are probably having fun without me, when I was little. So I think it's really relatable for younger audience. So
it definitely is, and it's definitely relatable for their parents. I gotta say, I have not played a game yet where an adult didn't come to the table with their favorite toy from childhood that they wanted to play. Yes. And that's always exciting to see that nostalgia. So.
Yeah. I want to have Sydney have friends over and just play a session of this with them. I think they'll just have a blast.
You totally should. Yeah, and then either before that session or after it, you guys should sit down with the tutorial in the back of the book and make your own hack together toy.
Oh yeah, that's right. I didn't even get a chance to talk about that. Yeah, that I was like that right there is interesting. I was like, anyway.
It's a big selling point.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
And for those who don't know what we're talking about, in the very back of the book, I have a couple of crafting tutorials, because again, the DNA of this game is from knitting and do it yourself and maker spaces and everything. So I had a friend of mine who used to run a maker space here in town, and he's still very much involved in that kind of in that part of the community. Write a tutorial for making your hacked together toy that like how to fit parts together, adhesives to use and things like that. So
And it's so funny because like one of the things that you can make is it's almost exactly like one of the miniatures in Stuff Fables. It's the doll head with the the robotic arms and like, oh my god, like yeah, it's awesome. Just buy it. Just buy the book. Go buy it right now. We're gonna end this video. Everybody just click on the link below and go buy it because you're gonna have so much fun with it. And that's gonna
thank you so much, Doug, for having me on the show.
No problem. Thank you for coming on. Thank you everybody for watching. Anytime you have another project, Stephanie, please let me know and we'll have you back on again. And this was so much fun and I can't wait to do it again.
I will definitely be dropping you a line not too long from now.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. All right, folks, that's going to do it for me. My name is Doug. This has been Victory Condition Gaming, because winning shouldn't be the only victory condition when you get to the table. We'll see you next time.